Hi Nat5s, so multicellular unit we are looking at control and communication, and in particular the nervous system and how that can be used in a reflex arc. So this is a reasonably nice diagram of your nervous system, and what you should notice is basically it goes everywhere. Now your nervous system is made up of two parts, your central nervous system and then the peripheral nerves, so everything else. And your central nervous system is then made up of two parts, which is the brain and the spinal cord. Now, I think that a lot of you will already know that. So here you've got your brain and then your spinal cord running down here. Okay, so the main parts of your brain that you're going to need to know. Now, obviously, the brain is super complex and there are hundreds of different areas of the brain that have been mapped out, but you just need to know the kind of three big parts of it. Okay, so we'll start with the biggest part, and that's the cerebrum. And so this whole section here, all of the kind of wrinkled bit, okay, this is really where you do your thinking. So you need to gather all the information that you're taking in from all your senses, and it processes it and sends instructions. This is really where you are. This is your thinking, your decision making, your memory. Okay, equally important, in fact you could argue more so, is the medulla, which is at the base of the brain, just connecting into the spinal cord. So the medulla controls your heart rate and your breathing. So without this bit, you would have a real problem because you would not be moving oxygen around your body or anything. And then finally, you've got this kind of lump at the back, which is called the cerebellum. And the cerebellum controls your balance. And I've left this word in, but you don't need to know this word, proprioception. So it's basically knowing where every bit of you is. And if we show you in a cutaway, just because sometimes you're shown these, you'll see that the cerebellum looks like a kind of leaf. So just be aware of that. So when it's cut away, it quite often just has that kind of leafy look to it. And then you've got your big brain bit over the top, all wiggly, and then you've got a kind of straight bit for the medulla. Okay. Okay, so you have in your system three types of nerve. We have the sensory nerves, which are taking information from outside your body into the nervous system, into the central nervous system more importantly. So that would be all of your senses. So that would include your obvious ones like sight, sound, but also things like pressure, heat, pain. All of these are senses that you will actually take information from into your central nervous system. Once it's in the central nervous system, we have a whole pile of nerves which are kind of connecting back and forward. They're transferring information around. So they will be all the ones inside your central nervous system. You might see them written as relay nerves and association nerves. Okay, but the one you're looking for here is inter. That's the term that's being used, and that's the one you need to have. And then we've got our motor nerves, which get an instruction to the muscles. So anything that makes something actually happen is going to be going to a muscle that twitches and then does something. So that's a motor nerve. So you've got sensory, inter, motor. So to carry the information, you need to have a way of moving somehow a signal. And again, I think you know this, that we have electrical signals that run through our nerves. Okay, and that's really important. And in fact, this is one of the ones that was mentioned right the way back in terms of energy requirement in respiration. One of the things was electrical signals in your nerves. So electrical impulses are used. Now how you do that you don't need to worry about. It's advanced higher to show exactly how this works. But it's very neat, it's very clever. It's to do with ions that you move inside your cell. So this carries the message along the nerves, and it's like a wave. So it starts with a kind of low electrical pulse and it pushes it all the way along. But you also need to have chemical messages, and the chemical messengers move between nerves. So from one nerve to the next. So if you're coming from a sensory nerve, bringing information in, passing it into an inter, you need to jump it across. And you've not got sparks moving from one nerve to another. You use a different message, you use a chemical message. So how you actually pass over this message from one nerve to the next nerve is at a particular type of structure called the synapse. Okay, so the synapse is actually the gap between neuron 1, which would be this one here, and neuron 2, which you're trying to pass the information to. Okay, and so coming along here, you've got your kind of zapped signal with electrical signals, but you can't get that electrical signal to jump the gap. So what you need is something else to carry that signal, and this is where these little chemical messengers come in. Okay, so when the zap hits the end, all of these little bubbles of neurotransmitter, which is the chemical, move to the edge of the synapse, so right to the edge of this neuron here. That's not a particularly good colour for that. There we go. Okay, so they move to this bit here, and they fuse with the membrane and release their little bubbles of chemical. Okay, the chemicals hit receptors, so this would be a particular thing that recognizes that chemical, so that'll be another protein, and triggers the next zap going down the way. Okay, this chemical is called a neurotransmitter, which I think you might have heard of, and the gap is, as I say, the synapse. Okay, so that's the terminology for this that you need to know. There is one arrangement of nerves that you need to know in a bit of detail, and that is the reflex arc. And so this is obviously about reflexes. So these are things that you need to react to very quickly. In fact, you react to them so quickly that you don't even have to think about doing them. Your body does it for you. And because of that, it's something that you need to have a very, very quick reaction signal set to do. It's something like, if you imagine, if you touch a hot surface, you pull your hand back and then you go, ow, that hurt. So you don't actually think about it. Your brain has dealt with it before you even think about what's going on. In fact, it's not even your brain at that point that's dealt with it. The closest thing to your hand in terms of the central nervous system is a bit of your spine, and it's your spinal cord that will have actually flipped around the signal and made you move your hand, and then will have said to your brain, you're now in a bit of pain. So you can do things without you actually having any thinking about it. It short circuits the think about things and just goes for just move. So if you think about what reflexes are, they have three things that are in common with all of them. They're fast, okay? They're protective, and they're not under conscious control. So shifting your hand away from something hot, that's obvious that it needs to be fast. It's obvious why it's protective. It stops you being burnt. And the fact that you didn't think about it, you just moved your hand and then you thought about it later, that's the not under conscious control. So if you look at these reflexes, you can think about how each of these is actually protective. Okay, so some of them are easier, and I would go with easier ones in terms of working out what's going on. So the eye blink is kind of obvious. If something's coming towards your eye, you'll blink to stop it going into your eye. If you're in low light, then you need to be able to see better so you don't bang into things. So when there's less light coming in, your pupils will actually get bigger by making the iris smaller, which will allow you to gather as much light as you possibly can round about it. I think the trickiest one is probably the knee jerk, which is if you hit a nerve bundle just underneath your knee, the whole of the front of your leg levers forward, and that's really to do with protecting potentially from harm at your knee, which is a pretty delicate joint in some ways. Okay, so here's our reflex arc. We're looking for the quickest possible response, so we want a very, very short set of pathways. Now, the shortest one you can get is basically to hook up the three types of nerves which we have, but just one after another. So we go receptor, that's important, so something which actually tells you that something's happened, and that receptor triggers a sensory nerve. The sensory nerve goes to wherever the closest bit of central nervous system is, so very often that's going to actually be the spinal cord. And then the spinal cord has an internerve which just whips around the signal straight away out to a motor nerve. So that's literally been, so it's not gone an internerve which then passes up to the brain, several other internerves pass information back and forward, and you make a decision about what you want to do and then you send it to the motor nerve. It's just sensory, intermotor, and then that motor nerve hits an effector. So that particular word is new the first time we've used that one, so make sure you're okay with that. The effector is something that has an effect. So that would be like a muscle in the arm to twitch your hand back. Okay, and that's us.